Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another of our deep dives into Uganda. This is our third Uganda deep dive, this time into Queen Elizabeth National Park. I am Tad Bradley, who you've probably become tired of seeing on your screen over the past 4 or 5 months. Another webinar, but with the Kusini collection here in Seattle. I'm going to be joined by Lindsay Harshman from Classic Africa Safaris shortly as well, who's going to offer us some commentary on the park. And we're going to jump in here and really go deep into what makes Queen Elizabeth such a special place. We have already done deep dives on Entebbe and Murchison Falls National Park, as well as Kibale. So if you missed those, as always, they are archived on our YouTube channel and you can find them there. I will be recording this session as well, and we'll send out a link to it if you missed any of it. And I'll also include links to the previous 2 deep dives that we've done. So Queen Elizabeth National Park is a fantastic national park, as you can see on your screen above. One of the things I love about it is the fact that you have this incredible Big 4 wildlife park that also has the backdrop of glaciated peaks in the Rwenzori Mountains. You can see a little bit, kind of a hint of the mountains there in that photo that actually Lindsay took years ago in Queen Elizabeth. But it's really something special to be looking at this big herd of elephants and then see these jagged mountains of the moon, or the Rwenzori Mountains, behind you as a backdrop. Queen Elizabeth is also really an ideal halfway point between Kibale Forest, where you have most visitors are going chimp trekking, and the gorilla trekking in Bwindi. So it's one of the very nice things about Uganda in your ability to be able to not only go primate tracking, but also have a really fantastic traditional driving safari, and all of it within relatively short distances as well. Queen Elizabeth also spans the equator line. So for those of you that have been there, you've undoubtedly taken a picture of yourself in front of the equator line in the middle of the park. And one of the kind of unique features of this particular national park. It's also really one of Uganda's most popular and very accessible national parks, which is actually, it brings positives and negatives. We'll talk a little bit about the negatives in a short time. It's about 800 square miles in its size, smaller than Murchison Falls National Park, but still quite a big national park. Founded in 1952 as Kazinga National Park, and then renamed 2 years later when Queen Elizabeth came to visit. And what's really special, as I've alluded to, is the real diversity of ecosystems as well as attractions within the park. So you have this sprawling savanna, like you see on your screen behind, backdrop with the Rwenzori Mountains, the really lush and thick Chimbora Gorge, which is a very unique geographical feature. Of course, the Kazinga Channel, which we'll talk a lot about here. You've got these lush, shady, and dense forests, and then really interesting crater lakes as well. So very diverse park to visit. And then the Ashasha sector in the south is, while it's the same part of Queen Elizabeth National Park, is in many ways really seen as and visited as a separate park almost, even though it is inside the boundaries of Queen Elizabeth National Park. We're going to show you a little bit of geography here. As you can see, I mentioned in between Kibale Forest, where the chimps are, and Bwindi National Park, where the gorillas are, equidistant between those two, which makes it an ideal pit stop for 2 or 3 nights in between your chimp trekking. This is all of the classic tourism route of Uganda, from Entebbe, the gateway for all the international flights here, and then off to the west, starting more often than not with Kibale. Some people also include Murchison Falls farther up here on your screen. You can actually get a highlighter so you can see it. Here's Murchison Falls up here, and then Kibale Forest in this area, Queen Elizabeth here, and then Bwindi National Park here in the far south. So you can actually see it. You can also, if you're not doing a driving safari, you can also fly into Queen Elizabeth National Park as well. Lindsay, if you want to jump in and just give us a bit of the context on where you fly into and the combinations of how best to do that depending on the properties that you're flying or that you're going to be staying at.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. 2 airstrips serve us Queen Elizabeth. We have, Tad, can you point
Yes.
Together we can function as one person. We have Kasese to the north, which is outside of the park and the most ideal airstrip for accessing elephant plains. We'll go into these properties shortly. Elephant plains and also volcanoes, Chambora Gorge Lodge and Mazik Valley Lodge. And that is, you're looking at Elephant Plains. That's very close. It's about 20-25 minutes transferring from Kasese. And on the other side of the channel, those properties, you're looking at probably about 45 minutes. And then Moyale is the other airstrip, which is actually on the peninsula. We're not using the Moyale Safari Lodge that often. We'll go into details on that, but the nice thing that we can do with that airstrip is if you take the morning flight from Entebbe, the classic vehicle and guide will be waiting for your clients there. And then while the lodge is a little bit outdated and sort of antiquated, beautiful views, clients can have lunch there at the lodge and then just go straight down the hill, 5-minute transfer to the boat launch and do their Kazinga Channel afternoon boating excursion and then head back to whatever lodge they're staying at. So that works nicely from a logistical standpoint.
And speaking of the Kazinga Channel, we're going to jump into what is undoubtedly one of the highlights of every visitor's trip to Queen Elizabeth, and one of the reasons that you definitely have guests that want to visit here, and that is the Kazinga Channel. It truly is one of Africa's great river or boating safaris. That includes Murchison Falls up in the northern part of the country as well, another incredible boating safari destination. But the Kazinga, as you can see, connects Lake George with Lake Edward. The channel here, as Lindsay mentioned, here's the Moyale Peninsula where Moyale Safari Lodge is and where all of the Kazinga Channel cruises begin from. It's 32 kilometers long, and it really is an experience of seeing some of Africa's largest hippopods. You have crocs as well in the water naturally, but then a lot of other game that comes down to the channel to drink, especially during the dry season. Big herds of elephants, buffalo, and amazing bird life as well. So over 600 species, and Uganda is one of Africa's great birding destinations. So for those of you that do have guests that are birders, naturally Uganda would be on their list, and the Kazinga Channel would certainly be one of the top destinations in the country for great birding. And one of the things that is unique, as I mentioned, about Queen Elizabeth is the fact that it is so accessible. And not only that, but it does have a number of villages inside of the park, which is fairly unique. These were all grandfathered in when the park was gazetted back in the 1950s. And one of the things that I kind of like about the Kazinga Channel is at the end of your trip, you do see one of the villages along the channel that is a fishing village. And that picture there in the upper right actually is of that village and of the fishermen and women bringing their catches in. So it adds a little bit of unique color to the experience, being able to see this very colorful, and the village itself is very colorful as well, as is the fishing boat. So not only are you going to see some amazing wildlife on the channel, but you also get a little bit of a taste of the culture, the fishing culture of the region as well. As I mentioned, lots of other game that you're going to be seeing in addition to those huge pods of hippos and crocs. You're going to have lots of elephants, and Uganda is one of the bright spots. I think I've mentioned this before in past webinars on Murchison Falls of the elephant crisis in Africa. You know, the elephants in Uganda during the Great Elephant Census was actually an increasing population, and you do see nice big herds in Queen Elizabeth as well. And the birding, as I mentioned, over 600 species. Another thing about Queen Elizabeth is, for birders, is the Marimangambo forest. Lindsay, maybe you can not butcher the name as badly as I just did, but in addition to the Kazinga Channel, that forest is another place for birders. So if you do get requests, that's something that's an area that's very accessible to, especially the Chambora area, and it kind of it connects the northern part of Queen Elizabeth to the Ashasha region in the south. So specifically for birders, it's probably not a place that your guests that are not really keen birders would be asking about or would want to visit. And then, you know, game drives. This is, as I mentioned, the most accessible savanna park in Uganda, and is a big 5 park with nice large prides of lion. That picture in the lower left is a picture I took a couple of years ago of a healthy pride within the park. You're going to see leopards potentially, obviously, just like anywhere except the Sabi Sands and maybe in South Luangwa in Zambia. They're certainly more shy and harder to see. But that picture I also took actually on the road between northern part of Queen Elizabeth and the southern Ashasha region. On my last trip a year ago in April, we also saw leopard inside of Queen Elizabeth. It's kind of tucked into a euphorbia tree, but we did see them. And you can see in the upper right corner is, again, that diversity of this park. So you have these open savanna plains of the Kaseni Plains, which are on the northern banks of the Kazinga Channel, which is really where most of your game viewing is done these days. And then on the right-hand side of that picture is the Chimbora Gorge. So really dramatic shot there of the diversity of the landscapes in the region. Of course, Classics vehicles are really, and their guides are two of the things that really distinguish the company. You know, I won't go into all the details about the vehicles. You can check out our first deep dive on Entebbe and Murchison Falls for that. But our vehicles are all custom built and maintained in Classics' own machine shop in Entebbe. So Mel Gormley, one of the owners, is truly an incredible mechanic and really a wizard of creating these vehicles that are both very comfortable as well as very reliable. So you've got the pop tops, the open windows, the sliding windows, and interiors are big captain's chairs with charging points, fridges, and lots of space to keep yourself comfortable throughout a driving safari.
Hey, Tad.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Hop in for a sec.
Yes, you
This,
may.
of course, because this is irony, this is one of the old vehicles in the picture. The fleet now has been fully updated. They're all new Toyota Land Cruisers that have been modified by Mel. So this is a Nissan Patrol. This vehicle still exists, but all the Land Cruisers are new. And just something of interest to point out, because this has been coming up obviously recently with COVID and SOPs. With the captain's chairs, our 7-seater vehicles, the majority of our fleet are 7-seaters with the captain's chairs. Clients can actually be 2 meters away from the driver, and all of our vehicles have audio systems in them, speakers, amplifiers, whatever it's called, microphones. There we go. So if that comes up, it's a point of interest with our vehicles, and they are pop top and slide windows. So these are the old roll down windows. They're slide windows.
Yeah, and in Uganda, regardless of whether you're going to fly into, say, Queen Elizabeth, or unless you're just doing a guerrilla trekking extension, you're likely going to spend some time in the classic vehicles, because there are drives between Bwindi and Queen Elizabeth, or between Kibale and Queen Elizabeth and Bwindi. So, you know, having those comfortable vehicles that are reliable is really critical. And I think as Lindsay and any agent that's gone on a FAM or has had guest visit with Classic can attest to, our vehicles really do stand both the test of time as well as the comfort test as well. So general game viewing on mostly the Kaseni Plains, northern part of the Kazinga Channel. Like I said, it's a big 4, so you're going to have lions, maybe leopard, nice big herds of buffalo, as well as elephant. Of course, rhino is only seen in the Ziwa Wildlife Preserve on your way to Murchison Falls. So it's not a big 5, but you do have a very good chance to see the big 4. And then one of the unique activities we started to add in for guests these days is lion tracking with the Uganda Carnivore Project. And I did this last April when I was in Uganda with the FAM group that we had, and it was a fantastic experience. The Uganda Carnivore Project is devoted to research and conservation of Uganda's big carnivores, which include, of course, lions, leopards primarily, but also hyenas. They also, they collaborate very closely with the Uganda Wildlife Authority. And they have 2 main goals. One is the scientific research of these big cats. But the number 2 goal, which may be the more important one, especially in a park like Queen Elizabeth, which does have so much population, human population, both on the outside as well as actually on the inside, is to reduce human-wildlife conflict and to collaborate with the communities to try to reduce that conflict between large predators like lions and cattle grazing communities. And what you do with this activity is you're in a classic vehicle with your classic guide. It's a very early start to the day. It's up in the Kisenyi Plains in the northern part of the park. You meet one of the UCP researchers, this gentleman here that we were tracking with. His name is James Kalewa. He's one of the assistant research project managers on with the Uganda Carnivore Project. And so he meets the vehicle, hops inside with his telemetry device, and off you go in search of lions or leopards, actually, as we found out later. It's not just all about lions. We did see, as I mentioned, a leopard in a euphorbia tree on our activity. And James gives a little bit of a background of the UCP, what they're doing, the numbers of lions and other predators within the park, any recent successes, how they're dealing with the community, and basically what their missions are. And while he's doing that, he's also tracking collared lions. And so one of the unique things about this is that inside of Queen Elizabeth National Park, if you're not with the Uganda Carnivore Project, you have to stay on the roads. And being on the lion tracking activity allows you to go off-road, which of course vastly increases your chances of seeing lions, not to mention you're tracking collared lions. So the chances are pretty good anyway. So it's pretty special to be able to go off-road to find these prides of lions. And then as you're off-road, you're oftentimes seeing other vehicles come by on the road, looking over, wistfully at you and wishing that they were also in that position and wondering who are these special people that get to go and go off-road and what are they looking at? Because oftentimes the lions, of course, are being lazy lions and they can't be seen from the road anyway. So it was an absolutely, I think, a must-do for guests that are coming. It's about $100 per person, and that money goes directly to Uganda Carnivore Program for their research purposes. And there's no guarantees in life, but the chances of seeing lions and potentially leopards when you're going out tracking them, collared lions and leopards, the chances are pretty good. And it is just an interesting insight into the issue of human-wildlife conflict, both with Queen Elizabeth, but also elsewhere in Africa. Obviously, we all know in this business how that is a real issue around many of the national parks and wild spaces throughout Africa. So I would highly recommend that. And it is not, it generally, Lindsay, you can speak to it if from experience, but I think it's almost always generally available, but we can't necessarily guarantee it based on the availability of researchers.
Yeah, we need to pre-book it too.
Right.
The lion tracking, I'm looking at the question that just popped up. The lion tracking is private. So how it works is Classic only operates private trips. We don't have group trips that you're selling into. So it's only your travelers in the vehicle. And you have to be up really early. I think is it 7, Tad?
No, you get up at about 6. I think you're at the park by 6:30 or so. So it's really very
and head
early
out, pick up the researcher and pick up the UWA ranger and head out. We have not really had issues. We did have one issue. We had one issue where the researcher very last minute was unavailable. I mean, there must have been some sort of human wildlife incident, but generally speaking, yeah, it's not a problem. We just need to pre-book it. It's next year prices haven't been set, but it's around 100, 110 per person.
And it's about a 3 to 4 hour experience in the morning. You start off about 6:30, 7 o'clock tracking the lions. And we actually saw 2 different prides of lions and then also that leopard in the euphorbia tree. So, and you, again, as Lindsay said, it's private. You're with your own guide in a classic vehicle. You just have the Uganda Carnivore Project or program, manager with you who's doing the actual tracking. It's really cool as well because you learn a little bit more about how telemetry tracking works with those beeps and that's kind of a fascinating part of it. So definitely a recommended activity, especially nearly guaranteeing the chances to see large carnivores in the park. And being able to go off-road is definitely a big advantage.
This also, really quick, it works well logistically to do the lion tracking in the morning and either Kazinga Channel in the afternoon, or if clients are staying at Chimbora Gorge Lodge, which we're going to go into some of the included activities there, because then you've spent the bulk of your morning in a vehicle. And the great thing about Queen Elizabeth is it's not all vehicle based. So then you can either do something community oriented, conservation oriented in the afternoon, or the boat.
Exactly. And here's just as Lindsay was saying, this is where the lion tracking activity happens in the Kisenyi Plains here on the northern side of the Kazinga, the northeast side, and then the Moya Peninsula where the Kazinga Channel launches start here is on the northwest side of the channel. So if you're spending your morning doing first the lion tracking and then the boat cruise, if you're staying down here, this is where volcanoes and Mazik are located, then you can spend that afternoon doing some of the included activities at Chimbora Gorge Lodge, for example. And from a logistical standpoint, you're not crossing back and forth. So it does work well. Jumping backwards here, you can go chimp trekking as well in the Chambora Gorge. This doesn't have the numbers of chimps by any stretch that Kibale does. It's also a bit more challenging just because it's a gorge. So you're having to walk downhill and then walk back uphill. They've been called the lost chimps of Chambora by the BBC, which I think is quite both magical and mystical and a little bit sad. It's an isolated chimp community of about 27 chimps as of the last count that I saw on the Volcanoes Safari's website. The gorge itself is about 13 kilometers long, and it's now basically cut off from the other populations of chimps and habitats of chimps elsewhere, thanks to human encroachment around the park, which again, talking about human-wildlife conflict. Volcanoes Safaris is doing incredible work to preserve the gorge and to create a buffer zone around the gorge. And so if you do have guests that are staying 3 nights and they want to experience a bit of a different chimp trekking experience than they had in Kibale, or for whatever reason, they're not going to be going chimp trekking in Kibale, we would say, it is an activity that's definitely worth doing. It's $50 per permit for the gorge hike. Chimp sightings are not as high percentage-wise as you would have in Kibale, where it's almost 95 to 99% chance to see chimps. I'd say, Lindsay, you said something about 60% chances in Chambora Gorge.
That's correct.
But it is a really beautiful forest and very different to Kibale. And again, it's this very interesting, isolated pocket of 27-ish chimps that live within this gorge. And so I think it's an activity that if you have enough time, 3 nights probably, or you're not going to Kibale, then it's definitely very worth your time to do it. So back to the map, we're now going to go into the properties and then speak a little bit about some of those activities that are included at Volcanoes Chimbora Gorge Lodge, which are really interesting and also very community oriented. This is the Chambora village here where both Volcanoes as well as Mazik Lodge are located. Interesting in that it is a Islamic village. So to be aware, especially if you have guests staying at Mazik, that there is a good chance that they might hear the call to prayer in the morning. They also may hear just sounds of village life, because Mazik in particular is very close to the center of the village itself. Chambora Gorge Lodge is a little bit farther from town, a little bit farther down the gorge, so not quite as much village noise can be heard there. But you will be driving back and forth through the village, going to going to the lodge. So just something to keep in mind. But what's really wonderful about the Chambora Gorge Lodge is that they have so many of these community enrichment and empowerment activities as well that are included in the rates. There's Chambora Gorge Lodge. There are 8 of those bandas that were fully refurbished throughout 2018 and 2019. They also remodeled the main lodge, which is actually an old coffee processing plant from years ago. There are those 8 bandas that all have a very kind of contemporary feel and theme to them. And they have views either of the savanna or of the gorge, the Chambora Gorge itself. Currently, there are 4 standard bandas and 4 deluxe bandas, with the difference being the deluxe rooms are a bit larger. They have a private terrace and a private sitting room. So here's an example of one of the deluxe rooms with that private sitting room you can see in that photo. You also get a personal butler with every room. There's a swimming pool that has been also recently refurbished with the big refurbishment of the last couple of years. And a new spa has also been opened here at Chimbora Gorge. And a 30-minute massage is included in the rates. Interestingly, actually for an additional $50, you get a another 50-minute massage. So, pretty darn good value for, you get your free 30 minutes and add another $50 for another 50. Pretty good rate. One thing to be aware of, and this is a great value if you have guests that are staying in both Queen Elizabeth as well as Bwindi, is the Stay 5, Pay 4 combo that is on offer with Bwindi Lodge and Chambora Gorge Lodge. So you have guests that are going to stay either at least 5 nights between the 2 properties, which is likely to be done anyway. You can take advantage of that Stay 5, Pay 4. And the alternative is if you book 2 nights at Chambora Gorge, you get the 3rd night at a 50% discount. And Lindsay, just to clarify, there's no specific time period through the year where there's exclusions on these offers. They're available 12 months of the year.
Yeah, there's not blackouts. The 2 offers cannot be combined, obviously. Right. But if you did say 3 nights at Chambora and weren't going to Bahoma, say clients were going to Southern Bwindi, Clouds, or Gahinga, Magahinga for that matter would also work, or doing the gorilla habituation in the southern sector, then I would just apply that 3rd night at a 50% discount. But yeah, no blackouts. It's valid for 2021. I assume that we will be able to swing it for 2022 as well, given everything that's going on. But just ask.
Yeah. And there's a photo of the new pool, the interior of the main lodge. And this is by far the most high-end or luxurious property in the Chambora area. So if you have guests that are luxury travelers, this is definitely your choice. It does come with a luxury price tag that is considerably higher than any of the other properties in the area. But honestly, the service, the inclusions, the location, and the food, it definitely is a good value despite the higher cost. And I think one of the things that makes it so unique and so special and shows your guests that the money is really going to important things in this area is the Chimbora Gorge ecotourism project, which Volcanoes Safaris has been developing over the past 10 years with the community. They've created a 3-kilometer long buffer zone between the gorge and the settled community area and the farming that goes on in the area to create that buffer between the habitats and the wildlife, in particular the chimps in the gorge and the communities. And with that, they've also created a number of community projects to support these conservation and community initiatives, including walking safaris of the Chambora Gorge in the buffer zone, as well as in the Chambora wetlands, which is also located just next to the lodge, and previously was an old brickworks factory that they've now removed. It was actually an illegal brickworks factory that was removed, and they've allowed the wetlands to come back to its natural state. So you can do a couple of walks in those areas. They're both about 2 to 3 hours, led by local community members who have been trained as guides, which is a great community empowerment initiative as well. And you'll also be able to plant trees. So they're trying, I think up to this point, I've read on the Volcanoes website, they've planted over 5,000 trees in the buffer area and the wetlands, which is fantastic. Basically reforesting this area that was deforested over, the past few decades. So in addition to learning about the forest, about the project, you'll also be able to plant a couple of trees to contribute to that. There's something like 200 species of birds now in the wetlands itself. So again, for birders, that's a must do, is the wetland walk. In addition to these walking safaris that Volcanoes offers, you can also do a coffee tour. You see in the lower right photo there, and this is actually a women's coffee collaborative or cooperative. There are 11 local women and their families that have banded together to form this cooperative. And you can walk to the coffee area and learn about the differences between Arabica and Robusta coffee plants. There's 100 acres of planted coffee plants where you'll be able to see the plantation and then learn about the process of actually picking the coffee beans, the coffee cherries, and removing the beans, drying them, and then actually get to taste a cup of Ugandan coffee that was harvested and actually made by the local community. All of the coffee that is served at the lodge itself is bought from this coffee cooperative, from these women as well. So a really great community empowerment project as well that your guests can participate in. And then there's other activities as well. One of them, a beekeeping tour, which I thought looks really interesting. And the bees are actually meant to deter elephants as well. You know, crop raiding elephants. Like so many of us, elephants don't like being stung by bees. And so they've actually utilized the beehives to be put around farmers' land to be able to use as a deterrent for keeping elephants away. So you can go and learn a little bit more about that project, as well as sample some fresh honey, I'm sure. So that's another reason for considering to do 3 nights at Chimbora Gorge. Not only do you have the option of the 50% off, as Lindsay mentioned, or the stay 5, pay 4 combo with Bwindi, but it does give you the opportunity then to spend a day experiencing a number of these really important community projects as a part of the Chimbora Gorge ecotourism project. So we do encourage our guests that are going to be staying at volcanoes to try and stay that 3rd night to be able to participate in some of these projects and really connect with the community and make a difference in that community as well. Lindsay, anything else to add on Chambora Gorge before we move on?
I don't think so. Sissy just did all of these. Volcanoes hosted a little fam trip for the gals in the Entebbe office late last year, and she said that they were all really, really well done, totally worthwhile. And I think part of the value here is obviously, besides the ecotourism aspect, you get your clients out of the vehicle, and there is, just because of the way that Queen Elizabeth is set up, you saw the map with the road going through the middle of the park, you do have to drive from point A to point B to go on game drives. You don't wake up in the morning and then just head out into the bush. You know, I mean, it's not like being in the middle of the Masai Mara where you're just already there. So I think sometimes we do run the risk of having clients feel ferried back and forth. So, you know, to be very frank about that. So I think the nice thing about this is that when you do Kazinga Channel, if you do the lion tracking, and then the, you know, traditional vehicle-based game drives, we can arrange it. If people are spending 3 nights, we can arrange it so they have an entire day. And of course, the classic vehicle is always there, and the park fee is always built in. So if something really exciting is going on in the park and they want to head down there, then they can. But if they want to spend a day just kind of making the most, when you're paying the price tag that you're paying for the property, it's really nice on a trip. I think all of the tradespeople would agree that consumers think that they want to constantly be busy, but when they get there, they want to spend one morning just kind of relaxing and having a cup of coffee on the veranda, and then they can do these afternoon activities and move a bit and not feel like they're going back and forth. So I think it's a really nice way to integrate something that's a little bit out of the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like we said, Uganda is a driving destination, but you do have the advantage when you're in places like Kibale and Bwindi, of course, of getting out of the vehicle, because you're going to be trekking for chimps or gorillas. And it's often not the case in Queen Elizabeth that you're going to get out of the vehicle unless it is to go into another sedentary activity, which is going on a Kazinga Channel boat cruise. So this does give guests that opportunity to get out, stretch their legs, get out of the vehicle for the day, as you say, not be ferried around for another day, and then really just immerse themselves in the culture and the community, which is pretty special activity. So We're going to finish up here with a few other properties in the area. Chambora Gorge Lodge, as I mentioned, definitely on the highest, most luxurious property in Queen Elizabeth. Mazik Valley Lodge is their closest neighbor. It is also a little bit closer to Chambora Village, as I mentioned, so it is important that guests are aware that they're likely hear village noise as well as the call to prayer, but it also has this really beautiful view out over Queen Elizabeth. There are also 8 tents, and each one of those tents has this really beautiful veranda that looks out over the park. It's a lovely property. It's definitely much more mid-level, but the price is also definitely right. And I found the welcome there when we were there in April. We didn't stay there, but we went there for lunch. Incredibly warm welcome, very earnest, and just lovely service from the staff there, and very nice food as well. You're just not going to have the same level of luxuries that you would have at Volcanoes, but it is a very nice property in a nice location, convenient as well. But then again, just remember that there is that village noise that can be heard. They actually give you earplugs next to your bed, and a nice little note that does mention that they are living in a community, and that if guests are concerned about being woken up early, that they suggest you put the earplugs in. So, again, this is a much lower level of a much lower cost, and but you do still get really nice service, and you don't necessarily have all of those extra activities, however, that you get as part of your inclusions with Volcanoes. Chambora Gorge Lodge next door, but still a nice property. A little bit different part of the park.
Sorry, Ted, let me just mention this. Yeah. This is, go back, Mazik used to be called Chambora Game Lodge.
Very confusingly so.
Right, I mean, so original, right? So you'll see on some consumer review sites, I have no idea, honestly, what TripAdvisor refers to it as, but I have seen still some maps and review sites still do call it Chambora Game Lodge. And it's nothing shady, nothing weird. They just changed the name because Chambora Gorge Lodge is next door, and I think there was a lot of confusion. But I agree with Tad. This is very much a mid-range property. They've just redone the decking on the pool, and both of those lower photos, the decking's been redone, and the rooms are perfectly fine. The bathrooms are a little weird, and they've always been weird, but it's a fractional cost compared to the Volcanoes property. And when I was there, I was the only guest. Rainy season, November, 2 years ago. And, they brought the table for me for dinner next to the fireplace, and Mzee Male, one of our senior guides, dined with me. And they actually, out of all of the places in Uganda, were the best with my dietary requirements. And they did like a macadamia or some sort of crusted fish for me with no flour and all that kind of weird stuff. So it definitely, for the right people, for a mid-range traveler, it is a very pleasant spot. So
moving on to Elephant Plains Camp, which is in a different part of the park, and I think I'll have a map here in a second. If I don't, I'll show you later where it's located, but it's actually on the northern side of the park. It's the only property that Classic uses on the north side, the northern border of the park. So as Lindsay mentioned earlier, it is very convenient for those flying into Kasese. It's a very short drive from the Kasese airstrip down to Elephant Plains Camp. And it's a new property as well. It's affiliated with Primate Lodge in Kibale. So if you have guests that are staying at Primate, it does combine well with Elephant Plains. And there are 6 of these really beautiful, very spacious cottages with large verandas. They're kind of stone construction with huge glass windows. As you can see, this is the main lodge on your screen with the boma there in front. In addition to the 6 double and twin in-suite cottages, there's also 2 family cottages. So which are 2 in-suite bedrooms with lots of space for families. So for a family group, we really like Elephant Plains because of the fact they have those 2 family cottages, and even the regular cottages are quite spacious. Here's a photo of just one of their regular cottages. You can see lots of space there, those big glass windows as well, all open up to your private veranda, which overlooks the park in the distance. All cottages have big, large bathtubs as well as showers. They're not outdoor showers, but you actually have a view of the outside from the shower, and they're massive. The bathrooms here, we actually stayed here in April last year, and the bathrooms are huge. So plenty of space. And it's also gets very great reviews on TripAdvisor as well. So for those of your guests that are checking you on TripAdvisor, you know, they're going to find nothing but raves about Elephant Plains online. So really nice for groups because it does have you know, a relatively large number of units with, I think, 11 or sorry, about 8 or 9 rooms, and then you've got those family cottages, which are great for family groups. And the main lodge is quite spacious. You can see in the lower left corner there, lots of seating inside, and then they also have a very nice infinity pool, which looks out over the park as well. Again, when we were there and stayed there, wonderful service, very good food. And here is the map coming up where I can show you where it's located. So it is advantageous, especially for the lion tracking activity, because you are just right on the edge of the park. There's actually not a symbol here, or it's actually not on the map, but it's right next to Simba Safari Camp here on the northern border of the park. You can see that blue. So when you're coming in to do the lion tracking in the Kaseni Plains here, you actually, this is the area where your guests would start the lion tracking. So it makes it a little bit less of an early morning to go from Elephant Plains to the lion tracking activity starting point. So yeah, it's a great option for groups, and it does kind of fit price point in between Volcanoes and Mazik. So it's a good upper mid-range option for your guests in that category. One property, as Lindsay mentioned, that we're not booking as much anymore these days, but it's been around forever. It's the classic Moyale Safari Lodge. The location is fantastic out on that Moyale Peninsula. It is where all of the Kazinga Channel cruises start from. You can see down here, that's actually the boat cruise departure point, the docks there. But to the right there, as you see the main Safari Lodge, in addition to that big traditional lodge itself, you also have a number of other options. You've got the cottages. There's a Queen's Cottage, a Presidential Cottage. There's a couple of family cottages. There's also, I think, you know, a hostel. So it's almost like a little village unto itself. So it's definitely a very big and busy place. Classic does not book the standard rooms here unless we do that for a tour leader or something. The standard rooms are just not up to our satisfaction. So we're only going to be booking the premium rooms or some of the cottages, depending on, you know, the configuration of the group. It's fine. You know, it is a great place for a lunch stop because of those beautiful views. You're up on the peninsula overlooking the channel. I was there several years ago and had a really nice lunch there. But it wouldn't be our first choice, except for maybe larger groups. It is an accessible property. So if you do have guests that have any mobility challenges, it's probably a good choice in that case. So, you know, Moyale would likely be our fourth choice these days, just because it has gotten a little bit older and tired, but does still occupy that lovely location on the peninsula. All right, so we're going to head now down to the southern part of the park, which, as I mentioned, Ashasha oftentimes feels like a separate and distinct park, but it is part of Queen Elizabeth National Park here in the far south. And what's, of course, Ashasha most known for and famous for is its tree climbing lions. And it is, you know, a decent chance to see the lions up in the fig trees in the south. I find this part of the park to be some of the most beautiful sections of Queen Elizabeth. These beautiful open rolling plains with a little bit of topography. Here you've got the Uganda cob kind of peeking up through the plains, through the grass, and good population of elephants in this area, as well as buffalo. We actually saw a hyena den when I was there last, and spent, you know, about an hour just watching the hyenas coming to and fro from their den, and then off to look for tree climbing lions. Lindsay, I don't know if you can handicap the percentages chance of seeing lions, or what you guys are seeing these days. Finger in the air. Finger in the air. I think I used to always say about 60% if you're staying one night, you know, a little bit more than 50-50, because most people are going to stay one night here. It's kind of an ideal midpoint between the northern part of Queen Elizabeth and Bwindi. So guests will often spend 2 or 3 nights up in, you know, the Chambora area and then spend 1 night at Ashasha on their way to Bwindi. Is that how most people are doing?
Your chances of seeing them are probably between 60 and 75% if you are spending the night. If you're just doing a transit game drive, if you're coming from Chambora or Mazik or Elephant Plains and you're en route to Bahoma and you're not staying at Ashasha Wilderness Camp,
right,
then, you know, you go through the tracks and look for them, and it's a lot lower. You know, I mean,
sure.
If people are really interested, then they should spend a night in Ashasha.
And this is basically the only option. There are a few other camps in the Ashasha area, but Classic generally wouldn't book them. The Ashasha Wilderness Camp, I actually really like this camp because it is one of the few properties, if maybe the only property in Queen Elizabeth, where you really do feel like you're out in the bush entirely, just because you are located within the park. There are no villages around, and all of your game drives would be around this area. And it is really a traditional bush camp. There are 10 tents. They have hot bush showers. I think they're bucket showers, if they're calling them bush showers. I actually haven't stayed here in years, so I can't remember the last time. But it overlooks a river there you can see in this next photo, which, you know, it's just a lovely location. We actually, a picture of the elephant previously on the earlier slide was actually a picture I took from my tent across the river, and this big bull elephant, you know, we woke up to hearing him chomping on the riverine grass, and he basically spent the next hour kind of walking along the river across from the camp as we were waking up and then heading off for breakfast. So it's just a beautiful setting, and it does really feel like more of an isolated wilderness experience like you would have, you know, elsewhere in, whether it's Tanzania, Botswana, something like that. So I do like it for that fact that it does really feel like you're away from people. Whereas the northern part of the park, as Lindsay mentioned, and as we showed you, you know, you are going to be near, because of the way the park has been situated with the highway going through it and the villages. You do see a lot more people, and it's also almost in many ways more of a cultural experience because of that. Okay, we're going to open it up to any further questions. I know there's been a few along the way that Lindsay has answered. If anybody else has questions, feel free to enter those now. Of course, we can also take questions via email afterwards. Lindsay is your primary contact for any Uganda inquiries. Phil Ward, of course, is one of the founders and the owners of Classic. He is still very much involved in the business, but is very glad to have Lindsay on board to be able to take some of the pressure off of him for any Uganda inquiries. And Hilda and Sissy are our incredible team on the ground in Entebbe, holding down the fort right now. Lindsay, maybe you could just give a very brief update. I know there was some news that APTA sent out yesterday about you know, Uganda reopening, which is a bit misleading. Yeah. So maybe you could clarify what the situation really is on the ground at the moment.
Yeah, I will. Also, Mira's asking about tetsis, and Jean did too. There are tsetse flies in Uganda, and specifically the southern side of the river in Murchison Falls is pretty bad, and the Ashasha region definitely does have tetsis, which is a great thing about having the kind of vehicles that Classic has, that you can close the windows, you can lower the top if needed, and the cruisers have air conditioning. You know, I mean, it's not like in your Toyota at home, but still, I had to do it last time I was there, not because of the tetsis, but it was just so incredibly hot in Ashasha. So that's something to keep in mind, but pretty manageable because you're not in an open vehicle. Updates on Uganda. Currently, there's not an opening date that has been set by the government. The airport is closed and the borders are still closed. So if anyone saw that announcement from, I think it went out in APTA, saying that all the tourism sites in Uganda are open, it kind of was inaccurate. Currently, the savanna parks are open and the primate parks are closed. And being that none of us on this call reside within the borders of Uganda, none of us can go there right now. There's not an opening date, and Museveni is standing his ground, saying that the East African neighboring countries that are opening their borders, they're doing it too soon. So we will keep everyone posted, but as of now, we do firmly believe that keeping the primate parks closed for the time being is probably the wisest thing to do until really good protocols can be put in place for trekking. Rwanda opened yesterday, 2 days ago, August 1st. So, oh, nope, 3 days ago. Oh, geez, so wow.
Time kind of stands still these days.
Man, weird. So Rwanda is open with a bunch of caveats, and the classic newsletter went out regarding that late last week. So if you need a link to that, just let Tad know or myself.
Great. All right. Thanks, Linz, for the update. It looks like we don't have any other questions. So we'll let you all carry on with the rest of your day. We will be doing a Bwindi deep dive in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that and be on the lookout for that. And I will send you a link to the full recording of this webinar, as well as our past deep dives in Kibale and Murchison. So look out for that in the next couple of days as well. Lindsay, have a great rest of your day on the other side of Seattle. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Have a good day. Bye.